How you doing tonight? Well, this is a little different. I've been given the amazing opportunity over the last 5 years to have over 750,000 people on one platform or another has heard my voice with this story, the message of just hope, inspiration, encouragement, a message of passion, tenacity, refusing to fail, refusing to quit, and being honest with ourselves, of being real with the man or the woman in the mirror. And so it's a little different today because, well, I'm not at a school assembly. I speak in high schools all across the country, other conferences and opportunities that I get. We just got back from Stuart, Florida. We're heading to Pennsylvania in a month, and Michigan and North Carolina, and it's just been a really neat but I'm local. I'm out of, not local here per se, but Indiana's hometown. Kokomo, Indiana is the stomping ground. So anytime I get an opportunity to share in the Hoosier State here in Indiana, it's my heart. And it's my heart because, listen, there's a lot of, where's all my students at? Anybody that's in high school right now, middle school, elementary school, should be in college. Where's people that are the age frame where they could be in college, they should be in college? Okay, where's parents at? Can I see some parents in here? We got parents in here. Yeah, that's right. Who's somebody that's just here and they don't know why they're here, right? All right, we got some hands. So, listen, what's amazing in life is this. Is that every single one of us, every single one of you, from the left to right, the front to the back, every person that's in this room right now that's hearing my voice through this microphone, we've all experienced these things called moments of impact. Moments where a single occurrence, a single event, one situation, one moment of time, where it's like everything around you just gets enhanced. All your senses get enhanced. You remember the clothes that were on your back, the conversations that were coming off the tips of your tongue, the people that were around you, the atmosphere and the environment, where something happens, either good or bad. Maybe some of us, we scored high on our test and we got a grade that we didn't think, or maybe you got the job that you were working hard to get and the application went through and you're going to get a financial outpouring more than what you've been at, or maybe your team won a championship or you won a championship in AAU or something that's impacted you, a single event where you remember all the details. It's enhanced. It's also when those bad things can happen sometimes, when we lose a family member, we lose maybe our parents separated, maybe something along those lines. Something happens though. It's a single event where it just seems like every detail in life is just enhanced. We act like a certain way and we talk a certain way and we carry ourselves a certain way because we care about the opinions of those around us. And so tonight, this evening, for this next 45 minutes to an hour, as we just kind of work through my life, man, I'm not here lecturing anybody. I'm not here talking down upon anybody. I'm not going to tell anybody what they can and they can't do. I'm just going to live life with you guys, and we're going to run at the roar, and we're going to realize one thing, that our lives, literally, it speaks, it screams, and it shouts. The actions that we do, man, the proof's going to be in the action. Talk is cheap. And so tonight, for this next hour, maybe you're here with mom, and maybe you're here with your kids, and maybe you're here with dad, and maybe you're here with your aunts or your uncles. At the end of the day, right now, I don't care who you're next to, it's just you and me. And if I could go around this room and look at every single one of you face to face in the eye, I would, because every single one of you have a story. Every single one of you are going through a journey. Every single one of you have had mountaintop experiences and dark valleys of struggles and pain. And if I could, I would listen to every story because I just love people. I want to ask this first question tonight. And when I do schools, I have them all raise their hands. And then everyone raise their hands right now. Hands up. I'll do it anyways. Hands up. Put your hands back down. Then I always tell them to raise your hands back up. Hands up. If your neighbor next to you doesn't have their hands up, you give them a rib shot. And then I have to tell the nurse, sorry about that disclaimer. Okay. I want to ask this question, serious question. How many of you, and parents, this can go for you too, how many of us, we come from growing up in our lives, or maybe we've even experienced as adults, we've come from a broken family where mom and dad maybe divorced, or maybe you and your spouse have been divorced, or you come from a fractured, a splintered, or a broken family. Would you just raise your hand? In your life, you've experienced that. Me too. Now let me ask this question. And again, you can lie to a lot of people, but there's one person that you can never lie to. The one person that you're always going to be honest with, no matter who and how you mask and masquerade it. It's you in the mirror. You know when you're not okay. How many of us that have came from that broken family, because my hand gets raised for that question too, how many of us can honestly say from that brokenness, from that circumstance, it can honestly say that it has bothered us, it has affected us, it has wounded us, it has angered us, it has caused us at one point in time to act a certain kind of way in our lives? Raise your hand. Me too. And see, my life, when I was growing up, man, my mom and my dad were my everything. I came from a not a broken family when I was a kid. My mom and my dad, and I never had one time, I don't overstate it, I'm not embellishing it, I'm not making it more grandiose or emphasizing it. I never one time did I see my mom or my dad when I was growing up from the first, second, third to the fourth to the fifth grade, did I ever see them fight in front of me. Never did I see them argue, not one serious knockdown argument or fight. Maybe I was naive enough, but I believe that I had a picture perfect cookie cutter family, man. I never once saw them have any problems. And see, my dad, he was my rock star, my Superman, my hero, my icon. He was everything that I wanted to be. I believed in my father. When he would speak to me, man, I would take his words like it was just absolute truth. And my dad, when I was young, he would look at me and say, Nathan, no matter what you want to be in life, no matter how high it may seem, no matter how far you want to go, no matter how tall that mountain, no matter how deep that valley, if you want something bad enough in life, you don't have to wait for anybody to give it to you. You can just go get it. You can take it. You can work hard for it. You don't need anybody to hand out anything. Good hard work will give you everything. And I believed that when I was a kid. And I took that so serious. I remember when I was in the fifth grade going into the sixth grade, the scooter laws weren't quite as strict as they are today. And I wanted to get a scooter so bad, and I worked hard, man. I saved one summer every dollar, every quarter, every dime, every nickel, every penny, every 50, every 100. I saved it all, right? And I went out and I bought this brand new scooter, $2,000, all summer long. Got the scooter. Had her for 3 days. Boom, wrecked it. Oh, man, I was mad. I mean, mad. And my dad knew I was mad. And maybe some of you have been there before, right? But I've had things that my parents have bought for me before that I've wrecked or I've totaled, or I got new clothes and I trashed them and stained them, and mom and dad have that talk, and probably some of us parents have had that talk. You don't respect anything that I get you. You don't treat things with care. You don't appreciate that. And so my dad didn't buy the scooter for me though, so he couldn't really say that to me. And he knew I was already mad because I had just sweat, blood, and tears all summer to get the scooter, and 3 days later, boom, it was totaled. $2,000 is out the window. And he looked at me and he said, Nathan, I'm going to ask you a question. I just looked at him and I remember this, man. He said, what did you learn working all summer, saving all of your money, just to wreck it 3 days later? I was still mad. I looked at him and laughed. I said, that's simple, Dad. I should have hit the stinking brakes. I should have hit the brakes, dude. What do you want me to say? But see, my dad at a young age, he taught me values and to respect and to be kind and to treat others like you want to be treated. But when I was growing up, we had these things called family meetings. How many of you in your lifetime, is your family at one point in time, have you ever been a part of like family meetings before, right? Can we get some hands raised, right? My dad loved to use family meetings to surprise us, and normally family meetings were called for good stuff, right? Either we're going on vacation or we were going to go to a shopping trip or something. Family meeting gets called. And I remember like it was yesterday. It was a moment of impact, right? It was one of those moments that I would say 95% of us can sit here and think about that moment. Something's happened in your life where everything gets enhanced, right? But I remember it. I remember the details. Dad looked at mom, mom looked at dad. And they looked at me and my sister. And they said, Nikki, Nathan, we need to talk to you. Your mom and I, we're going to get a divorce. And as soon as those words rolled off the tip of my father's tongue, man, it was like the life got sucked out of me. Whew. I looked at him and said, what did you say? People with divorces and separation have problems. I've never seen the problem. I've never seen the fight. I've never seen the argument. I was hurt. It didn't make sense. You see, when I was growing up, though, I was never allowed in my parents' room ever. And when I say I was never allowed in the room, I mean like never, ever, ever. For the next hour, I could just say the word never, ever, ever. The door, I only remember the door being open 4, maybe 5 times. And the reasonings they told us that was that, listen, Nikki and Nathan, my sister's name's Nikki, we need some space from you guys, because I was young, 5th, 6th grade. My sister was probably the 10th and 8th, 9th grade. No, she would have been the 10th grade because I was 4 years older. She's 4 years older than me. We need some space, really, from me. I've always known one speed, and it's go. I've only had one characteristic my whole life, and it's the squirrel. I'm everywhere, all times, all places. It's just who I am. If I was my mom and dad, I'd probably want some space away from me too. But this was different. See, behind that door, they weren't who they said they were to me. Behind the doors where the drugs and the alcohol happened, behind the doors where the verbal, mental, and social abuse happened, behind the door, they weren't who they said they were to me. And as I was growing up in the 6th, 7th grade, as I began to find these things out, I was angry and I was mad. And I remember like it was yesterday, I looked at my dad and I said, I'm never going to be like you. I'm never going to drink, I'm never going to drug, I'm never going to party. I felt lied to and betrayed. See, I understand that they were trying to shield me and protect me because they didn't want us to know, me and my sister, to know the depths of some of the struggle. They were trying to give me a safe environment, and I understand that. But how I internalized that and how I took that was that they were living a lie, and they had been wearing a mask, and they had been these chameleons, and that my life was built on deception, and I was so hurt, and I was so wounded. But what they did teach me, they taught me how to wear a mask too. They taught me how to put on the smile and to act like everything was okay. They taught me how to act like everything was going to be just picture perfect, and it's to smile and go on about life and keep making good grades and making good choices. But on the inside, I was hurting and I was dying and I was wounded and I was a young kid that wasn't okay. But I didn't think that it wasn't okay to not be okay. And one of the number one things that we need to understand as people, that it is okay to not be okay. That it is okay to not to have it all together. Because there's not a parent, a teacher, there's not a student, there's not a friend, there's not a husband, a wife, a son, or a daughter that has it all together. We're all struggling with something called life, man. We're all trying to figure out purpose and value and where am I going. It is okay to not be okay. And we're in a generation right now that everything's so microwave and surface that we want to bottle everything up, and we don't want to talk and get in depth with some of our emotions. So we masquerade and we shield it and we put a mask over it, and we never face the struggle. We put Band-Aids on it and we take the Tylenol for the pain, right? We never sit down and begin to talk about some of our stuff. And a lot of us, especially in high school and in middle school and us going across this world, this generation is battling with purpose and value and stuff. Identity. Does anybody see me? Does my parents really love me? Does anybody care about me? Because I tell you what, when I go to schools and I get to talk to students one-on-one, the number one thing that all of our children want is just to know that my mom and my dad really give a darn about me, man. And they know when you're on autopilot. They know when you're on your default setting, when you're there and you're listening, but really you're not listening. We need to be able to build an environment and a culture where our youth, our sons and our daughters know that mom and dad, we care. And I get it. Some of us come from those broken families where maybe you and your husband or you and your wife are separated and you're raising a child and I understand the reality. I was there too. But at the end of the day, if you guys could just look at your sons and your daughters in the eyes and let them know that I genuinely care about you. See, I was masquerading all of those things, and I acted like I had it all together. I acted like there was no problems. But I was just angry and I was hurt, and I wasn't facing the real me. And the problem with me is, see, I had best friends. I had Jared and Jordan when I was growing up. Jared wanted to go to become a pharmacist. Jordan was going to go to the Army. And if I could have been anything that I wanted to be, I would have been a photographer for the National Geographic, simply because I loved animals, I love photography, and I love to travel. You put those three together, it's a great job. That was my dream and my passion. And I had Jared and Jordan. And one thing that I always talk about best friends, man, that many of us have best friends, and many of us put ourselves in the best friend-like area of somebody's life, right? But the truth of the matter is, we need to understand what a real best friend is. See, a best friend, what's your name? Brandon, man, if I was your best friend, man, if we were kicking it and we were running and I was a dude you send a text to, maybe we go hunt, maybe we go out and fish, maybe we go out and just go out and do whatever we're doing, right? Just hanging out, having a good time. If I was your best friend and we had that relationship with each other growing up, that means I would be invested in your life and you would be invested in my life. That means at the end of the day, growing up, if we were bros from middle school to high school, right? You would know the struggles, you would know the journey, you would know the pains, you would know some of the dark, this unbelievably hard times that I've had, and I would know the same things about you. I would also know your dreams and your goals and your future. I would know what you would want to become and who you are and what you're aspiring to be. And see, a real best friend, Brandon, man, what I would be invested and committed and absolutely bound to if I was calling you my best friend, my job is to help get you to the next level. My job is to partner up with you, to invest in you, to push you to greatness, to push you to success, to push you day in and day out to be the best you that you ever could be. And that's a real best friend, man. That's what real friends are. Real friends are there to have each other's back through up, down, ins, and outs. And we push each other to get to the next level because this life is tough and not one of us are meant to be an island. We need each other. We're a community. When I do schools, when I go into a school somewhere, I always tell the entire school, you're a family. Like it, love it, or leave it. You're a family in this place for the next 4 years. And we need each other. We're not meant to be an island. You're not meant to have to deal with the struggles and the pains on your own and to bottle it up inside. Because when we do that, only thing that begins to happen, the expression that comes from that are poor choices. We start looking at drugs and alcohol. We'll start looking into self-harm and thoughts of suicide. We'll start looking at all these other things that we have going on in our life. If we don't recognize that it is okay to not be okay. And I got a friend, and I got a parent, and I got a counselor, I got a teacher. I got some system of care that I can communicate with. I had Jared and Jordan. But my problem is that I was wearing a mask real well. And my sister was 4 years older than me. And so when I was in the 5th grade, she was a freshman, the 6th grade, a sophomore, the 7th grade, a junior, the 8th grade, a senior. And my idea of what high school was so supposed to be was great memories and the good old days. And that's when you leave the legacy. And that's when people are going to remember you. And my sister, where I was from, was a bigger high school of a couple thousand students. And we had just won some state championships. And right before I got there, and there was all this pressure and this prestige. And just, to me, high school was a big to-do. And I wanted to be the popular kid. And a lot of us in here, all of us that are in school, I know that you struggle with sometimes making sure that you fit in with the people around you. We sometimes will compromise who we are because we're afraid to stand up and to speak up and to speak out and to stand for what we really believe. So sometimes the pressure of the atmosphere and the environment in the school will cause us to act, to talk, and to do things that really we're not okay with because we want to fit in with society. We want to fit in with the culture. And when I went to high school, I had all this pressure to want to be that popular kid and to maintain the images and to fit in with certain groups and cliques of people. I went through my freshman year. And when I went through my freshman year, I had Jared and Jordan. I was in marine biology. I was in photography. I was doing what I was supposed to be doing to become the photographer for the National Geographic. I had Jared and Jordan, good friends around me. We were in the AP classes. When I got done with my freshman year, our school would always take a kind of a poll of what freshmen in the freshman class, from the administrators, the teachers, and the students, who they feel was going to be one of the most successful. Who had the most potential to actually make it out there and to make a name for themselves. And in every one of those conversations and polls with the teachers, administrators, and students, I was involved in almost every conversation at the top of the class because people knew that I was driven and I had this purpose to become. A lot of it was operating from pain. A lot of it was coming from the hurts of my parents. But when my freshman year got over and I began to grow up to get that 14, 15-year-old, I remember I looked around at my life, right? Like a timeline. And I said, okay, I've got 3 years of high school left. What will all of you, the students, think of me at the end of these 3 years? What kind of imprint? What kind of fingerprint? What kind of imprint am I leaving right now? Who do people think I am? And is that who I want you to think I am? Running around with Jared and Jordan and doing the things that I was doing. And at the end of the day, I made one of the worst decisions. And listen, if you're in middle school or high school, elementary in here right now, don't you dare make one of the worst decisions that I ever made in my entire life, is that I decided to cut off good friends that knew me, man, that understood my pains, that were invested in me. I decided to begin to cut off people and systems of care that genuinely were invested and committed to me, so I could begin finding people that would give me the image and the persona and the certain prestige that I thought you wanted to see me with. I was more concerned about what everybody else thought about me than who I truly was. And so I cut off these two friends. And I went to find me these new groups of people, these new groups of kids. And I found them. They're the juniors and the seniors. But see, they weren't invested in me. They weren't locked in with me. They didn't know my struggle. And so I started hanging out with them and kicking it with them. I knew one of them was really popular, and we kind of knew each other, and he was kind of my in with the group. And the problem is, these new friends that weren't invested in me, they started saying, "Hey, Nathan, why don't you try this? Why don't you smoke this?" And so these kids, these new friends, started calling me Bacon because they said I was fat like a pig. And then they gave me the nickname Nasty Nate. And the reason they gave me the nickname Nasty Nate is because, see, my mama and I and my family, she did the best that she could raising me, but I didn't come from money. And when it was time for me to get new clothes, I never got new clothes. I got a lot of hand-me-downs from cousins and hand-me-downs from uncles and Goodwills and clearance aisles were my family's best friend. I didn't get a lot of the designer things, so I never had top-notch, top-line clothes, right? And then when it came to school supplies even, my mama did the best that she could, but my sister always got to get a black backpack or a white backpack or a gray or a blue backpack, some kind of color-neutral backpack, because I never got new school supplies. I always got the hand-me-downs from my sister. And so I didn't have a lot of nice things. And when I started ripping around with these kids, man, it was a time for me to get my license. And my mom and I went out, we did the best that we could, and we got this old Blazer, but it was beat up and it was kind of rusted out and it was a clunker, but it would get you from point A to point B. But it wasn't nice like their stuff, because they had all nice things. So they gave me the nickname Nasty Nate because they said my stuff doesn't meet up to theirs. And even though, listen, those words they were saying to me, they were hurting me. And every time they would call me Nasty Nate, it was like arrows getting penetrated into my heart and darts that were just getting shot, because words hurt. A lot of us in here and a lot of us that are in school, we know words hurt. But I was willing, because I cared so much about the opinions of all of you and what everybody else thought of me, I was willing to stay around kids that weren't invested in me, students that weren't committed to me, people that didn't have my best well-being in their life, because if I stood next to them and rubbed elbows with them, at least all of you thought I was part of that group. And even on the inside, words were hurting me. You know, I go into schools and I ask questions. I'm going to ask the same question here tonight. I'm not asking about you. I'm asking, do you know somebody? Do you know somebody in your circle of people? Not you, but you know somebody that has talked about or has mentioned the possibility of maybe just ending their life and committing suicide this year. You've heard someone talk about suicide before. Raise your hand. This year, students, you too. If you're a student, you've heard somebody talk about that, just raise your hand. You've heard somebody talking about suicide. I go into the schools and I ask those questions. Half the school, most of the time, raises their hands. And I ask questions about how many of them know somebody in the school that's self-harming. And half the school's hands gets raised. And you know why I talk about suicide and self-harm? I talk about it not because I read a book and I wanted to get educated, because you know what? I wanted to have a good talking point so I could go into schools and talk about things like I knew what I was talking about. I talk about suicide because I know what it was like, man, when the verbal abuse and the mental abuse and the physical abuse began happening from these people that I was associated with. And I began believing the thoughts that I was Nasty Nate and I wasn't nobody, and that my life didn't have any worth or value or importance. I remember what it was like when I began to have the thoughts of giving up. I remember what it was like when I climbed up step step by step up the ladder in my sister's garage. I remember what it was like when I grabbed the rope, and I remember what it was like when I was at the very brink of jumping, and I felt like giving up was an option. But at that very point, I realized something. This will solve nothing. Suicide, ending our life, solves nothing. All it's going to do is leave hurting people behind. All it's going to do is end my life. And all it's going to do is basically say the world was able to beat me, and I wasn't going to let the world beat me. And I'm telling you, in this room, and when I go across schools all across the country, I know some of us have battled those thoughts of giving up. Some of us have battled those thoughts of maybe just throwing in the towel. We have battled those thoughts because we see it on social media. We see it on TV. It's sweeping our nation across this country. If you get on our YouTube channel, Your Life Speaks, and you look at videos that I've asked these questions in our communities, in our schools, if we don't start talking about it, man, our kids, our babies, our young men, and our young daughters are hearing this conversation. They're seeing it around them, and it's happening, and some of us are believing the lie that that is an option. And I'll be the first one to say, don't you dare die. Don't believe the lies and the whispers. And one of the main reasons is because, see, what's inside of every single one of us, no matter how dark, how much of a struggle, how deep the wound may be, how alone we feel, we have to realize that suicide, that's a whisper and a lie, and we're not alone. We're not nearly where we think we are. And inside of every single one of us are doctors and scientists and teachers and entrepreneurs and athletes and actors and entertainers and social workers and teachers and counselors. And I mean, the list goes on. Inside of every one of us who believe the lie of maybe giving up, inside of every single one of us is greatness, man. And we need each other. And when I talk to these schools, I let them always know, listen, maybe whoever that's in here that's thinking about giving up, because I have them raise their hands, and those hands represent somebody that's in that school. I always let them know, listen, every one of those hands represents a heartbeat. And somebody in here, you don't know, maybe you're going to be the one that has a cure for a disease that my little girl's going to get. And I need you, and you're not alone, and don't you give up. But we've got to be willing to take off the mask and to talk. And parents, we've got to be willing to look into our children's eyes, eyeball to eyeball, to let them really, genuinely, truly know that we care about them. And we are invested in them. And if that means we've got to take these phones and we've got to put them down for a little bit, if you've got to turn your TV off for a few minutes, and if you need to look into your son and your daughter's eye, because they know when you're really listening. And don't just expect that it's not your kid. I talk about him because I know what it was like to be there. I talk about self-harm because I know what it's like, and I can count the scars on my hand when I was going through it. If you're in here tonight, right, and you're one of those students, or maybe you're not even a student, you're just an adult even, and you've been battling self-harm, you've been battling the thoughts of maybe life's just too tough, there's too many bills, I've made too many mistakes, I've made too many poor decisions, I've been labeled, I've been cast, I just don't know if I can pull myself out of the pit, out of the gutter, I feel like maybe giving up is not an option, don't you dare die. And if you're struggling with that, you need to realize that it's okay to not be okay and to talk to somebody. And if we're best friends, right? And if you've got a best friend, listen to me. If you're a best friend and you know one of your peers, one of your friends, one of your associates have been talking about self-harming, have been talking about suicide. Listen, if you're a best friend, so I tell every school that I go to, best friends are invested. And if I know somebody in my circle who's talking crazy like that, or just talking with that pain that's operating from that struggle and believing that lie, my job as a best friend is to go to that person and to get them to speak up and to speak out and to tell somebody that they're not okay. And you know what, man? Maybe you won't do it because you don't feel like you can. My job as a best friend, if I'm really your best friend, we're not friends because you have to like me all the times. We're not friends because we're always budding. We have to joke and crack up. I'm your friend to get you to the next level. And if that means if I got to stand next to you and speak up and speak out for you and to let somebody know that you're struggling, I don't care how mad you get at me, because I care more about you becoming successful than you dying. That's a real best friend. That's what a real friend is. And your students and our kids need to know that it is okay to speak up and to speak out when those around them are hurting. And these are just real issues. This is what I talk to kids all across the country about. Not only then did I battle those things, they started saying, Nathan, why don't you smoke this? Why don't you drink this? Why don't you try this? And I remember when I was that kid. I remember when I was the young man that said, I'm never going to touch a drug. I'm never going to touch a drop of alcohol. I'm going to become successful. But here I was growing up, feeling the peer pressure of those around me, realizing that I was wearing a mask, not wanting to talk about the pains that I was dealing with from a kid. I started being willing to compromise who I was. I started being willing to compromise the things that I stood for because I cared more about fitting in with the crowd. And so at the end of the day, I started drinking a little and I started smoking a little and I started just partaking in this. And the funny thing is what's wild that here I am, I always liken it to, and it's great that I have all these stuffed bears around me. I always liken drugs and alcohol when I first started my sophomore year, that it was like this cute little bear cub. Alcohol and drugs, it was so simple, it was so nice, it was so like harmless, right? I could drink a little and I could smoke a little and I could do whatever I wanted to do just a little bit and go back and go back to school and do my homework, because at the end of the day, when I first started, a bear cub is innocent and it's little and it's cute and it's cuddly. I went to San Diego Zoo this last summer, and there was panda bears there. Guys, I'm telling you what, I don't care how big and tough and burly you think you are. You get in front of a cute little panda bear, you're getting your phone out, and you're going to smile because that thing was cute, man. See, panda bears and bear cubs and all these little bears are cute when they're young. They look innocent, but at the end of the day, that bear cub, when it begins to grow up, it will have the ability to kill me, to maul me, to destroy me, to tear me to pieces. In my sophomore year, I started feeding the bear cub. And one thing you can take to the bank, like it, love it, or leave it. When you start feeding the bear, you may make it through middle school. You may make it through high school. You may make it through college. You may make it through your 20, 30, and 40. But when you start feeding the bear will come at some point in your life to kill you. It's coming. It's coming to make a problem. It's coming to cause chaos. And it's coming to put a disaster in your life. And so here I was as a sophomore. I started feeding the bear. And my bear started growing, but I was willing to compromise who I was because, see, I remember when I was growing up, to all my students that were in here, I remember sitting in the seats and they would have the assemblies and the convocations. They would have parents and teachers and police officers, the DARE organization, the great organization. They would have all these people coming in here to talk to us about drugs and alcohol. And at the end of the day, I would be the dude that would be sitting back, kicked back, saying, these things can never happen to me. Yeah, board choices, da-da-da-da. I got this. I'm going to be okay. And out one ear, out the other. My senior year, I kept feeding the bear, wearing my mask, maintaining my images. I went from being a straight A student to a straight F student. My life was falling apart. I got kicked out my senior year. I didn't even graduate. My life was just falling apart. I went to the Army not because I wanted to. I went there because I had to, because I had started stealing to feed the bear. You see, when you start feeding the bear will never be satisfied, and it's always going to come back to be hungry. And my life went from being a young man that seemed like he had it all together to being a young man that you wouldn't want to be near me because I was labeled and I was marked and everybody knew who I used to become. Everybody had known in that time frame when I was 18, 19, 20 years old that I was just nasty Nate. And that kid, he was going nowhere in life. Parents would warn their kids to stay away from me. I was marked and labeled. And yet I still didn't want to face the man in the mirror. I still didn't want to face the struggle. My life went nowhere fast from 19, 20, 21, 22 to 23. I watched dreams and hopes and goals just blow away. I was okay with not just being a nothing. I was okay just living in my hometown for the rest of my life and just being what everybody said I was. Just a drug addict, an alcoholic, can't get right. Stay away from that kid. He's hopeless. there's not a chance that he's ever going to fix it. July 17, 2009. I was 23. At 23 years old, I should have hopefully just been graduating college at 23, maybe getting ready to begin my second 4 years to further my education. Possibly at 23, maybe I was working really hard and I was getting ready to get my journeyman, maybe as an electrician or a welder. At 23, maybe I could have been beginning to have my family and have children and pursue to have the things of life, of a nice home and a vehicle, taking my family on vacation. But at 23, the poor choices that I had made and refusing to believe that I could change, I found myself living in my hometown, working for a family friend. He was my boss, and I was living with him, and I had no responsibilities. I would go and make $300, $400, $500 every Friday, and on Monday I would be broke, and I'd be having to ask him and his family, who were my employees, my employers, for money for lunch. I was hopeless. I had fed the bear, and I was ready to give up. July 17, 2009, a Friday night. I was 23. We went and cashed my check. There was a big party going on. And at the big party, me and my buddy went and got a bottle of alcohol. And me and him got a fifth of whiskey. And we went to this party and we split it. And when we were done with the fifth of whiskey, they said, "Nathan, we're going to go to the bar. Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll go." "Well, are you driving?" And I said, "No, I can't drive." You see, I had just gotten my second DUI 2 months before this. I had gotten one in the Army, and I had gotten my second one 2 months before this night. I said, "I'm going to go, but I'm not driving." I get into the car. We go to the bar. When I get to the bar, I have a tab of tequila of like $73. So now I drink a half a fifth of whiskey and 10 shots of tequila. And what we used to do in my community, in my group of friends, right? Somebody would always leave the bar early to go to somebody's house to get the house ready for an after party. And then everybody from the bar would come to the house. And they said, "Nathan, we're going to TJ's house. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Bet, yeah, sure, man, let's do it." I was lit up. I was drunker than a skunk. I'm all in for the party. They said, "Well, great. You know TJ. Here's his keys." I was going to leave early. I get on the phone and I call Priscilla Owens. Priscilla had just moved from Alabama 2 months before this. She had friended a group of us. She was trying to get reincorporated with the town that I was from. And there was a group of 8 or 9 of us that she had befriended, but she wasn't here that night. I get on the phone and said, "Priscilla, will you come pick me up and be my DD? I need to ride to TJ." She shows up. And when we go to school, we always hear about, if you're going to drink, don't drive, give your keys to somebody else. I follow the protocol. I call Priscilla. Priscilla shows up. She's my DD. She's sober. Before it's time to go, I go to the bartender and I order a case of Bud Light beer bottles. And I turn around, and when I turn around, my buddy stops me. Named Mike Browder. He says, "Nate, you're not driving, are you?" I said, "No, she is. She's my DD." He said, "All right, cool." I said, "I'll see you at the party." And we walk out the bar, and we get to her white Jeep Cherokee, and I take that case of Bud Light beer bottles and I put it in the back passenger seat. And somewhere in the process and the chaos of coming and going from the bar and all of the people and the confusion and the noise and just the commotion, some reason Priscilla gave me her keys. And I walk around and I get into the driver's seat and I put on my seatbelt and we take off. And as we're on our way to TJ's, I remember so vividly, like moments of impact, the conversation that I was having with Priscilla. I remember so vividly, like it was yesterday, the words we were sharing, every vowel and syllable as we were getting to TJ's house. I remember I can close my eyes and I can look to my right and I can see her blonde hair. I can see her face. And I can remember the words she said to me as we were getting to TJ's. And it simply was this: "Tree!" And it was black. I was in a helicopter. Then I was laying and I was looking up and there was bright lights and 2 shadowy figures over me. I was at the hospital. Police officers asking me questions. Because see, Priscilla's cell phone was locked and her ID wasn't in her purse, and so there was a woman fighting for her life for 8 hours and nobody knew that she was fighting for her life. She was a mother of 2. She was a daughter and she was a sister. And the police needed to know who she was. I had never even been to Priscilla's house, but I knew the street she lived on, so I told them the street, and they had to go door knocking that morning letting them know that their daughter, their sister, and their mother was fighting for her life. I just knew I was getting ready to get arrested. I mean, I was drinking and driving. I don't have my license. I'm on probation. My mama shows up at the same time. When she shows up, she starts talking to the police officers. And I don't know exactly why. Maybe it was because my ankle was shattered and the police didn't want to have to pay for the bill. Maybe it was because Priscilla was still fighting for her life and they didn't know exactly what to charge me with. Or maybe it was because my mother had knew one of the police officers and they said, she had told him, listen, when you need him, we will turn him into you ASAP. All I do know is I got the crutches and I walked out and I got into my mama's car and I took off every mask. I took off every image that I was trying to maintain. I took off every thought, every pain, every hurt. I quit deciding that I wasn't going to talk about it. I just wanted my mama. And my mom looked at me and said, Nathan, you need to understand something. Your life is about to change forever. You see, my sister was a nurse. When the accident happened, she got the phone call. The paramedics report read, when they arrived on scene, that there was only one person reported in the vehicle, and it was me slouched over the steering wheel. The police report read, at the point of contact and how the car looked, I was going anywhere from 60 to 63 miles an hour, and there was no brake marks, no skid marks, no signs of me trying to stop. I hit the tree at 60 to 0, boom. And when I hit the tree, my hands were on the steering wheel and I snapped the steering column and it knocked me unconscious. When I hit the tree, my foot was on the gas pedal and upon impact, it shattered it. When I hit the tree, the case of beer bottles was in the back passenger seat, flew forward like a rocket. And Priscilla, who was in the front passenger seat, didn't have her seatbelt on. She flew forward like a rocket. And the beer bottles and Priscilla flew in the air and they met at the same time when they came to the front windshield. Whap! And they pancaked her. And she slid like a rag doll to the floor. And as my mom told me that, all I could think was, no! Because I remember when I was in school, and I remember when I was battling these things that I would never, we never think like those things happen to us. We always think that can happen to somebody else. That can never happen to our kids. That happens to other people. That definitely never happens to us. Like whenever I heard about drinking and driving and accidents and all that happens to like old people down the road, like that's not going to be me. And here I was. My mom told me that. The paper that morning of the night of my accident read, 2 lifeline to Parkview Hospital, 1 fighting for her life. And I got on the phone because I wasn't arrested yet. I was clueless to what to do. I had all these emotions and fears and pains and thoughts of what's next. This can't be real. I called the police station. They wouldn't tell me anything. I called the hospital. They wouldn't tell me anything. But I knew the paper had ran the story. So I stayed up the entire night. I waited and waited and waited because maybe the paper was going to share the story in the headline. I just knew they would say something. And I sat there and waited till 4 a.m. And it was like a movie. Everything slowed down and the paper man shows up and the window got rolled down. And he threw the paper out and I jumped up and I grabbed it. I ripped it open and there was the headline. Crash. Victim dies. And at 23 years old, I was faced with the reality that I had just taken the life of Priscilla Owens. No! Couldn't be real. You know, before that happened, I was making deals with anybody and everybody. I know some of us sometimes we make deals. If I just get out of trouble this one time, I'll change. Mom, I promise you, don't whip me this one time and I will be different. Let me get out of trouble this one time. I was making deals with anybody and everybody that night. I was talking to thin air. If somebody can hear me, I promise you, get me out of this and I'll change. The paper came out, crash victim dies. Wild part of the story is Priscilla's family, they didn't know me. They never met me. I only had known their daughter for a few weeks. They wanted me to call them within 3 days. They had said in my hometown, I had gotten word that they wanted me to call them. And what do you say? You pick up the phone, what do you say? I'm sorry. I call and they don't answer. And I was kind of glad because I didn't want to call back, but I knew I had to. And I pick up the phone and I call back. And they said, Nathan, listen, we don't know who you are. But what we do know is that Priscilla was 28 at the time. She left here and we knew she was coming to pick you up to be your DD. You made a terrible choice that night. But we don't want to hold you solely to blame because Priscilla knew better. And we don't want to destroy two lives by one poor choice. And it didn't make sense to me because, see, and this time I thought about all of my shame, all of my dumb choices, all of being labeled and all of this who I really had been in the past, right? I was ready to throw in the towel because finally now I'm going to get pinned and pegged for it because at the end of the day at 23, I wasn't okay with who I was. I knew that I was falling so short of the potential and the value and the purpose that I had, but I got caught up in the system of those poor choices and then caught up in maintaining the images, caught up in not thinking that it wasn't okay to be not okay and to letting somebody know that I needed help. I was too ashamed, too embarrassed. At the end of the day, I had lied so many times, who would believe me anyways? And I was like, no, listen, this was my fault. You deserve to hate me. You deserve to want me dead. You deserve to want me in prison. They said, no, Nathan, yes, you're partially to blame, but we don't hold you solely responsible. But who did hold me responsible was the state of Indiana. Who did hold me responsible was the prosecutor, and I was charged with reckless homicide. And I was sentenced at 23 years old to 15 years in prison. Her family, they said, Nathan, we don't know you, but we want you to know we genuinely do love you. You're like family to us now. Please just don't let Priscilla die for nothing and try to make the world a better place. And when they told me that, I said, deal. And I didn't even know what that meant or how to make that happen because I didn't see any out for what was ahead of me. I got sentenced to 15 years at 23 years old. Now listen, I want to ask this question. I asked the schools the same question. And I don't care if you're a parent, I don't care if you're a mom or a dad or a sister or a brother or an aunt and uncle. I want you, and you need to be painfully honest with yourself. How many of you sometimes, and who cares who's around you, this is you being real with you. How many of you sometimes, if you're just honest, do you feel like you've made too many mistakes in your past to change? Raise your hand. I see those hands. How many of you feel like sometimes at the end of the day, you just want to give up? Raise your hand. I see the hands. I had every reason to throw in the towel. I had every reason to quit. I had every reason to say, you know what, life won, life sucks, and I quit. I was faced with 15 years. But I'm here to tell you, I don't care who you are in this room. Maybe you have battled an addiction before. Maybe you have battled thoughts of giving up. Maybe you have battled self-harm. Maybe you have came from the broken families and you know at the end of the day you wear masks. You maintain images. You care about your image of what you project to those around you. And you overcompensate because a lot of times many of us, we overcompensate and not really who we really are. We swing so far to the other side because we are so afraid to actually begin to talk about some of those real issues we have in life. I had every reason to quit, but I decided, and I don't care who you are in here. Maybe some of you in here, right? You're not as far, you wouldn't put yourself in that kind of category, but you know really at the end of the day, there are dreams, there are goals, there are things that you wanted to achieve in your life. There are places and circumstances and just things that you've wanted to do, but you know you've procrastinated. You know you've been only going halfway in. You're not nearly as focused and tenacious about those things. You kind of just get lukewarm and go through the motions in life. I don't care where you at. I know there's people in here right now that know every single day they're not not putting their best foot forward to be the best husband, to be the best wife, to be the best mother, to be the best father, to be the best son, to be the best daughter, to be the best friend, to be the best person for them individually. We all sometimes find ourselves becoming complacent, but I'm here to tell you, as long as you're breathing up in this place, right? As long as there's a heartbeat up in here, as we're sitting around surrounded in this community of liberty, as long as we're gathered, I'm telling you what, as long as there's breath in your lungs, as long as you're still breathing, there is the ability and the reality and the hope that you can achieve it, you can change it, and the best is still to come, but it's going to take hard work, it's going to take sacrifice, it's going to take dedication, it's going to take determination, and it's going to take a tenacity, maybe like nothing you've ever faced before in your life. And I began to believe, even though when I was in prison, even when all things were stacked against me, even when everybody had given up on me in my hometown and I had been cast and labeled and marked as this kind of person, I decided at the end of the day, it was time for me to change, and I wasn't going to change for anybody else. I was going to change for me, and I was going to finally become a man of my word and keep one promise to one person, and that was that mother. And I started making good choices and good decisions at 23 years old. One choice, one decision, one moment, 1 minute, 1 hour. Within 2 years of being incarcerated in the state of Indiana, doors began to open, and I started leaving the prison in street clothes and going to Ball State University and IUPUI and Brown Mackey and Brown County school systems and youth conferences and youth gatherings and adult conferences and gatherings and sharing and motivating and inspiring and just laying it all. I've always known one thing since I've changed my life around. I got one thing, and it's called passion, it's called tenacity, and it's the refusing to quit. I don't quit when I'm tired. I've learned to quit when I'm finished, man. And then I'm not going to let anybody get in front of me to stop me, because I believe and realize that I control a destiny in my life like every single one of you do. I don't care what you've been in the past. Maybe you battled alcohol. Maybe you've battled smoking weed. Maybe you've battled popping pills. Maybe you've been battling heroin or meth. Maybe you've been battling self-harm and suicide. Maybe you've been battling treating your spouse the way that you know you should be treating them. Your character has been deficient. You've had attitude problems. I don't care what your issue is. Your issue is a real issue, and it's not bigger or smaller than anybody else's. But we can begin to face those issues and begin to make good choices and be honest with ourselves. And I began doing it, and doors began to open. I started leaving the prison. I would go into places and to community events just like this all across the state of Indiana. And when I would get done sharing, right, I'd have somebody look me into my face, and they wouldn't even know I was in prison when I was talking, right? Because I never let anybody know that I was incarcerated. And I would pour my heart out, and one person would look at me and say, "Nathan, that sounds kind of cliche, but how do I even know that it's going to really work? I've heard it before." And I could look him directly in his eye and say, "Listen, man, you have no idea. The fact of the matter is I'm in prison right now, and I'm promising you good choices and good decisions will have good outcomes and good results. The prison walls couldn't even keep me in because I'm incarcerated." And I'd be like, whoa. I guess I can kind of somewhat believe some of the stuff you're talking about. I got released 11 years early. I've been home for 5. The last 5 years, I've had a heart and a passion to impact lives, for people to realize that you're never too far gone. You've never made too many mistakes. There's always a better you tomorrow. When you look in the mirror, you should see what you want to become and go after it at all costs. Treat others kindly. Treat others the way you want to be treated, and realize and recognize that talk is cheap, and that your life speaks, and your life can scream, and your life can shout. We have to stop being offended when people don't believe in your dream and your goal, because sometimes probably we've given them plenty of ammunition in the past to not believe your words. So don't be offended and hurt if you're battling alcoholism, if you're battling drug addiction, right? Don't be hurt or offended when nobody just believes that you woke up one day and said, "Hey, I want to get sober." And that's been the heartbeat of my heart. And that's been my passion. And so I decided that I wanted to start going into schools 5 years ago. And I had no idea even how to get into schools. I don't really have an education that way. I wanted to start public speaking, and somebody said, "Nathan, public speaking, that's kind of it's a big field out there. There's a lot of competition. There's a lot of, how are you even going to get into that?" And I said, "I don't know, but failure's not an option." 4.5 years ago, I took 100 packets, right? I had one little CD that I burnt, that when I spoke at Ball State in 2010 or 11, they recorded it, and I had a couple clips of me speaking, and I took that little clip, And I put it on a CD, and I was naive enough to believe that I could mail those out to schools and that the schools were actually going to put the little CD in. And I put a whole packet out, and I mailed it out to over 100 schools. $300, $400 of my own money. I was invested. We've got to be invested in our change. We've got to be invested with our own sweat, blood, and tears. We don't need hand-me-outs anymore. I went back to thinking what my daddy used to tell me. I spent $300, $400. I got one school to call back. And some would say it was a failure, but I was like, so you're telling me there's a chance? And I was committed, I was prepared, and I was willing to respect whatever craft, what I was wanting to put my hands to be the best at what I did. And we went in and we spoke at that school, Madison Grant, right outside Marion, Indiana. Teachers taught, students taught, words spread. The second year, we ended up doing 15 schools. The third year, we did 44 schools. This year, my fourth year, this isn't a school, but Friday, I will be in my 84th school this school year. We've been to Florida. We've been to Pennsylvania. We're going to Michigan, Kentucky. It's growing. And why do I say, it's not a pat on my back. It's the fact that, listen, when you want something bad enough, you can go get it. Don't settle for the naysayers. Don't settle for the people that say you can't do it. Who cares about the crabs in the barrel, man? Go after it with everything inside of you. And if you've battled drugs addictions, if you've been battling these things, man, today's your day. This is the time in your life when you can realize, you know what? There's a lot of people that struggle. There's a lot of us that have issues. And it's okay to not be okay. It's okay for you to open up your mouth and to talk to a friend, a parent, a spouse, a teacher, a counselor, and to begin to have the courage to take off the mask and to begin to speak up and to speak out and to let your life speak. And I don't know any of you by name except my camera guy and the one back there running the merch. I don't know your story, but I know you all got a story. And your story is important. And your life is important. And it's okay to not be okay. And so tonight as you leave, hopefully we're working on getting into this community school system. Hopefully we're working on getting into a lot of the communities around here with the message of Your Life Speaks. But before all that, I'm here in front of you all tonight. All my parents, don't presume you know your kids. Look them in their eye. Build a relationship, a real in-depth, not a surface relationship. Get off autopilot. Let them know you care. Because there's an enemy of lies that are taking kids' lives in this community, in this city, in this country, in this world. I just got a message today from a young lady in the Clinton school system. They've lost their fourth one to suicide this year. I know in America, this will be one of the worst statistical years we've ever faced because kids feel hopeless and alone. And they feel like nobody cares. And so they look to drugs. They look to alcohol. They look to anything and everything to fill the void that people are supposed to be filling.